So a couple of weeks ago, one of the sponsors of our show, Bevy's Bees, gave us some of her mangrove honey. Now that's a Florida thing, well, southern thing, I guess, and I've never tried it. But she also gave us a bottle of mead that she made using said mangrove honey. And we don't have the bottle to show you anymore because we drank it. It was that kind of good. So I said, hey, Bev, can I get that recipe? And guess what? She gave it to me, along with some of the stuff that she used in it, like pollen from her bees and this Tazo wild sweet orange tea that she used. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better setup, right? So today we're going to recreate Bevy's mangrove honey mead. So to start, what you want to do is make a tea. Now she did a tea of raisins, black tea, and the wild sweet orange tea. She didn't specify how many raisins. I guessed I went with, a decent handful. A little word about raisins. It used to be believed they added nutrients to a brew. And everybody went through that phase in their brewing where we believed that. We haven't thought that in quite some time, and I know for a fact that they really don't add much nutrient at all until you fill it about half to 2/3 of the way with raisins, like we did in our raisin wine, in which case they probably do add enough nutrients.
But the thing they do add is flavor, and
Exactly.
we happen to like the flavor of raisins, particularly the smoky, aged notes that dried fruit in general gives to a brew.
With the orange, it's a really nice combination, and I thought that was pretty clever. She also added black tea for extra tannins. So this is gonna have a really nice, smoky, balanced, citrusy, spicy flavor to it. I love that. But something else that has come up is some people have expressed concern over sulfites in raisins. And in truth, some raisins are sulfited, and those raisins have more sulfites than if you added sulfites to your brew in the first place, which is nuts. However, we have always used these particular raisins, sun-made raisins. They say right on their website they are not sulfited and they don't put sulfites in them at all. Now they're white raisins, they do. So be very careful if you are worried about sulfites or have a reaction to sulfites. You don't want to use the white ones, but the regular sun-made, totally okay, no sulfites in them. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is get some honey into the fermenter. Now something interesting about this, her original gravity is 1.118, all right?
And we were just like, what? And then we remembered something. This is Bevy's Bees honey.
She only used 2.5 pounds of honey. On my math, that shouldn't even be like 1.100, because 3 pounds is normally 1.105. Hers is 1.118 with 2.5 pounds. That's some powerful bees. But anyway, let's get 2.5 pounds into this fermenter. Now that we have our honey in there, there's a little bit of honey stuck in the top here, and I have this tea that's been steeping for 5 to 8 minutes or so. It's ready to go, so I want to use a strainer because I don't want the raisins. And I'm just gonna pour it through the strainer and into the funnel, getting all the goodness out of the funnel, We want that. That tea smells really good. As far as what to do with the raisins, some people will bake with them or things like that. We may just compost them. It's all good. Try to reuse them in some way though. Now to this, I'm gonna add some water, get it about halfway up so I can start the mixing process. As always, I like to go about halfway and I wanna mix this up real good. We wanna get some oxygen into that. It's gonna look all cloudy, but that helps the yeast when they first start up to build a colony and get things going. So I use a solid stopper, stick it in there and give it a good shake. Get all the bejesus out. While I'm shaking this up, I want to add something that Bevy used that I've never really experienced using, and that's bee pollen. Now, normally I wouldn't recommend using this because this is kind of like stuff that the bees need. We already take their honey, now you're going to take their pollen too. However, I know Bevy is about as humane and naturalistic about her beekeeping as you can possibly be. And she would only use it if it was extra or unnecessary. She said she gets a very limited amount, so she gave us some to try. She uses 3 tablespoons in this. So I'm gonna pour some in. Now our funnel is wet, so it's gonna stick a little bit, but there's more water going in later. So 3 tablespoons of pollen. This is supposedly one of the best nutrients for yeast you can get. That's why we're not using any fermate or anything like that in this one, because we don't need it. The problem is you need a lot of it to make it as a good nutrient. I mean, 3 tablespoons is a significant amount. That's almost a 1/4 cup. So you can see why I have a little bit of a concern for the bees, because that's a lot to take away from them all the time for every single brew. I mean, imagine if you were making 5 gallons. You know, that's a lot of pollen. So long story short on the bee pollen, if you can source it from a reputable, humane source, go for it. But buying it online, I don't know, that just encourages over farming, and I'm a little bit concerned about that. So I'm just gonna put the bung back in and continue mixing. But as you can see, looks like mud. That's pretty much the color you're looking for. All right, time for some more water. I am fully expecting a vigorous fermentation, okay? Because of Bevy's honey is really, really good, and I know that pollen is going to really go, and she used 71B yeast, which I'm going to add now. She says a teaspoon. Yeah, that's a teaspoon. I'm just gonna use a whole packet. And as always, thwack your packet. Gotta get it all out. They like to hide in there. One more little mix here. Now it's time to take our gravity reading. This will be our original gravity that you can use to calculate if it's done, if it's stalled, how much alcohol you have, things like that when you're all finished. I am putting this back in because everything here was sanitized in
The red bucket of sanitization!
the one-handed wave today. Okay, from the top, it's a little bit hard to see because there was some foam and it occluded everything, but I looked from underneath and it looks like 1.094. So we are about 24 points away from her, but you know, a little bit more water, a little bit less water, a couple more raisins, all those things can be a factor. And that is the thing. Even batches of honey from the same place can be slightly different too. So not really worry. If it comes out too dry, we'll just sweeten it. You didn't see that. And last but not least, the thing we want to add to this is a bung and an airlock. And if it doesn't sit in there well, we just add a rubber band to the outside and hold it in place. But this one seems to be doing okay. I'm gonna write up a label, stick it to the bottle, let this sit, and once it starts up, we'll be back to show you what it looks like.
Okay, so it's been about 15 minutes and it's going. It's just going.
Yeah, as you can see from the little clip here, it's already started up. And I would have said, no, it can't be, except that the foam down here is expanding. It's getting bigger. So yeah, I think this is going to be a very energetic fermentation, like I said before. So we're gonna do a blow-off tube for this one, just to be safe. You also notice the extra level of protection. An aluminum cookie sheet with a little bit of a wall, just in case it spurts up and out, it doesn't end up on the floor. So to do a blow-off tube, very, very simple. Take the airlock off. What we have here is a section of tubing stuck into one of our bungs. The bung goes in there, and if it won't stay, rubber band time. It's okay, you wanna do that. Into a jar. This happens to be a pint jar. You can use a pint, you can use a quart, you can use a gallon if you really want to, and it is filled with Star San sanitizer fluid.
We've also found that if you use some tape or a rubber band or whatever material of your choice to affix the tube to the jar,
that way it doesn't bounce around.
A lot better, and it doesn't end up on the floor or something untoward.
Yeah, because see how that tubing isn't as flexible as we might like it to be? Yeah. So I'm just gonna wrap that around there and affix it to the side of the jar. If you need a couple pieces of tape, it's okay. You know, don't worry about it. Don't use duct tape, it leaves a residue, but masking tape, it's like my favorite thing. It works for everything. And I looped it through the handle just to hold it in place, but that should do the thing. And it's already starting, I can see a bubble just about to come out. There it is. So we know this is already going, and now we are safe. How long do I leave the blow-off tube on for? Usually a day, maybe 2 days. After that, it starts to settle down a bit. No problem, put the airlock back on.
Yeah, you can tell by watching this area. So if this continues to get more and more vigorous, as we think it's probably going to, this foam is actually going to fill this cavity up, and it may go into the tube itself. And that's why we switched out to the blow-off tube, so we won't have that mess in our airlock.
Right.
But once that starts to recede and settle back down, then we know it's time to switch back to our airlock situation.
And the reason why a blow-off tube works better isn't because it keeps it from coming out. It's that this is a much larger area for it to have to force stuff through. So it's less likely to clog and go pew and shoot that airlock into the ceiling, like we've heard from some people having had that happen. So this way, anything that spurts up in here, it'll just sit in the tube and then it'll shoot back into this bottle. Will we lose a little bit of product? Possibly, but less than if we had to clean out that airlock every 10 minutes. And you know, if you try scooping things out, plus there's less chance of an infection getting in. That's the real secret here. So we just switch them out. By the way, all this stuff was sanitized. Everything's been cleaned properly. Don't even worry about that. But this is gonna, what are we gonna do with this now?
We're gonna let it sit.
This is gonna go for a few weeks, and then we'll be back to show you readings and things like that in the next segment of this video. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.
Bye-bye.